Cronkite News starts now.
Good evening and welcome to Cronkite News on Arizona PBS. I'm Jordan Spurgeon. Thank you for joining us. A contractor overseeing the Arizona Senate's unprecedented recount of 2.1 million ballots from the November election has complied with the court order and released its policies for ensuring voter privacy and ballot secrecy. Thursday's release of 3 documents by cyber ninjas came a day after a Maricopa County judge refused to allow the company or the Republican-led Senate to keep the material secret. Judge Daniel Martin gave them a day to appeal, but they declined. The Brennan Center made a request to the Department of Justice for federal monitors to be dispatched immediately to the site of the third audit. Liz Howard, a member of the senior council in the center's democracy program, says this level of secrecy is unprecedented in election procedure.
I am unaware of any situation ever before in this country where a bitterly divided legislature has voted along partisan lines to take possession of election materials months after an election has been certified and it's over, and then hand over those ballots to more partisan actors in a process that they are calling an audit. I'm unaware of that ever happening here in the States or anywhere abroad.
In new legislation headed to Governor Doug Ducey, Arizona voters will have to fix any problems with their mail-in ballots by 7 p.m. on Election Day in order for their vote to be counted. The measure approved by House Republicans would nullify a settlement between Secretary of State Katie Hobbs and the Navajo Nation. The settlement gave voters 5 days after an election to sign their ballot as long as it's received before the deadline. Voters whose signature is rejected because it doesn't match the one on file would still have 5 days to fix the problem and have their ballot counted. It has been a little over a year since the pandemic began, and since teachers transitioned to online learning, there are many things they learned, with struggles and triumphs along the way. Cronkite News reporter Sedona Meadows spoke with 2 educators, one who has spent 27 years in the profession and one who started her first year during COVID.
How the heck am I going to teach phys ed from home and they're at their home? You know, we don't do a lot with technology and physical education. We're all hands-on, we're in the gym, we have all the equipment you can ever want here. And because I teach fitness, and I thought, wow, this is going to be very difficult.
Maria Court is a physical education teacher at Mesa High School, where she started teaching 27 years ago and never left. But this past year has certainly been different.
It's very difficult from home. You know, I'm looking at about 35, 40 little squares on my computer, and I have to say at first it was a little bumpy. Get your cameras on so I can wave to you and see your little faces. I couldn't get a lot of emotion out of them. I couldn't get them to speak. I couldn't get them to turn the camera on.
Court spent the whole summer researching fitness videos and how to teach within a virtual format. Although she hasn't always been with her students, she certainly does the exercises with them.
I'm not that far away from you guys. I'm right on the other side of the screen. So let's get through this together. And that's been my thing from the beginning. Let's get through it together. This is temporary.
One of the coolest things though is I got to get a look into my kids' homes and a look into their lives, which I think was really cool. And so before even getting them in the classroom, we got to see, who are you living with? What does home look like? What are you hearing in the background? What are you experiencing? So that was honestly a really cool perspective.
Jordan Simon is a first grade teacher and a first year teacher within Mesa Public Schools.
And I've learned so much. We have gone from remote to modified to in-person kind of for both semesters. So, and mostly would change on a weekly basis. We always said that just don't get comfortable. You just fly off the seat of your pants, and if they tell you to do something, then you do it and kind of be prepared A through Z.
From first year to 27 years teaching, one thing is the same between these educators.
I've learned that it's not about me as the teacher and how hard it is for me.
I always say take the small moments, and you may have a really bad day, you might have a lot of kids that had a hard day, but that one moment where a kid learned a new sight word or read a new book or just said I love you, it changes your whole day, and it really makes you understand the purpose and the reason of why you're there.
In Mesa, Sedona Meadows, Cronkite News.
Court is continuing to utilize innovative ways to teach both remotely and in person, and Simon accepted a full-time teaching position with Mesa Public Schools following her ASU graduation this spring. Golf is a sport played by people from all walks of life. One of the top seeded golfers in the world lives in Arizona, and he's ready to keep competing. I caught up with him as he explains his story from serving in the Army to finding a new passion on the greens. Larry Solano is currently ranked in the top 3 of the Disabled Golf World Rankings. If you see him on the course, you'll understand why.
Golf to me it's opened a whole new world for me.
He discovered he could play golf from a seated cart in 2001, and it became a hobby for him. It wasn't until he discovered the U.S. Disabled Open in 2019 that he began realizing he could compete with others.
Okay. So that's when I really started getting more focused that, there's a whole division out there for me to play against.
While golf is his passion, it's been a long journey for Larry to end up here. After high school, he served in the U.S. Army, where in 1989, during the invasion of Panama, his life changed forever after he was shot in the back, suffering a spinal cord injury that instantly left him paralyzed from the waist down.
He rolled up to my bed and he goes, I'm here to let you know that, there's things, after your injury for being in a wheelchair. And that's when I kind of screamed at the nurse, get him out, get him out, get him out. I'm not ready for this stuff.
As tough as it was to accept, Larry knew he still had a choice, and ultimately decided he wouldn't allow his new way of life to prevent him from living it to the fullest.
This is not happening. This is not happening. And we had our little conversation, our little talk, and that was it. That's when I was like, okay, that's it. We're done. It's time to move on.
From that moment, Larry decided to never let anything in life become too much for him. This applies to golf too, as he's gone from dribbling the ball 20 yards down the green to smashing 180-yard plus drives on a consistent basis.
Well, people on the first tee will be in absolute awe as he's over here just practicing. It's very rewarding, and I'm very fortunate that I got to run into him.
Larry shines on the green not only because of his play, but his contagious laughter and spirit.
So win or lose, if naturally with golf, if I shoot in the 90s, I'm gonna be mad at myself. But if I shoot my numbers and I lose, what can you do? I mean, I'm still gonna go home. I'm still gonna laugh. I'm still gonna say, damn, what a day.
There's that spirit. For Cronkite News, I'm Jordan Spurgeon. And now, a look back at some of our top stories, including a look at the polarized state of politics, DACA protections, and what sure sign is here that spring has sprung.
It's no secret that we live in a polarized time, from social media to talk radio and cable, right up to the riot that took place at the U.S. Capitol on January 6th. If you're thinking it feels worse than it's ever been, you may be right, as Jake Holter reports from our Washington bureau.
When mobs stormed the Capitol on January 6th, Arizona resident Jacob Chansley, better known as the QAnon shaman, left a note behind for Vice President Mike Pence.
Control, we love you guys. We love the cops.
It's only a matter of time. Justice is coming.
Prosecutors say that note was a threat. If it was, Chansley is far from alone. U.S. Capitol Police say there were 8,613 credible threats against members of Congress last year. In just the first 3 months of this year, there were 4,500 threats, already more than all of 2017 and on pace to double last year's total. Thomas Mann of the Brookings Institute blames the increase on partisan demonization of the other side.
It sort of legitimizes the most extreme behavior that individual citizens might take.
The hostility is not just directed at Congress. Threats are being felt at the state level as well. Anger over the 2020 elections brought protesters to the home of Arizona Secretary of State Katie Hobbs, who had to be under a security detail for a time. She said it was hardest on her family and staff.
I'm not going to say that any elected official signs up for this when they run for office, because I think it's terrible that we're at that point. But certainly the people that work in my office, the people that work in other election offices are public servants, and they didn't sign up for this.
When State Senator Paul Boyer was the lone Republican to vote against arresting Maricopa County supervisors if they failed to turn over subpoenaed election materials, the angry response briefly drove him from his home.
Yeah, my assistant told me just here at the Capitol, I received over 5,600 voicemails just on the vote of contempt alone. My personal cell phone, I probably got about 9,000 text messages, about 20,000 emails, and hundreds of phone calls that I'd missed on my own personal cell phone.
The anger does not come as a surprise to Daniel Cox of the Survey Center on American Life. A recent center survey said nearly 3 in 10 Americans agreed with the statement, quote, "If elected leaders will not protect America, the people must do it themselves, even if it requires taking violent actions." And thousands did take violent action on January 6th when mobs stormed the Capitol as Congress was inside certifying the election of President Joe Biden.
There was a lot of anxiety by people that and fear, which is appropriate. You could hear a gunshot right outside the chambers. You could start to smell the gas.
Republicans were more likely to support resorting to violence than Democrats in Cox's survey, 39% to 17%. But Arizona Congresswoman Debbie Lesko says it's not a partisan issue.
You know, we have to all work together. I certainly have differences with some of my Democratic colleagues on major issues, but I think we should all treat each other with respect.
But Cox said America still has work to do before it can reach that point of respect again.
We've got to shut down some of this worse rhetoric about the other side represents some malign force in society that needs to be destroyed, right? The political rhetoric has just got to be dialed down.
In Washington, Jay Coulter, Cronkite News.
It's been a little more than 100 days since that attack on the Capitol. The Justice Department says that more than 400 people have been arrested so far in connection with it, and the investigation is continuing. At least 4 people from Arizona have been charged, including Jacob Chansley, the so-called Q shaman.
DACA protection can bring undocumented immigrants rights that most Americans take for granted. Things like working, driving, and going to school, but it won't land them a job on Capitol Hill, because it's illegal to hire dreamers for federal jobs. Some Arizona lawmakers want to change that, as Molly Hudson reports from our Washington bureau.
Jose Patino first knew he wanted to work in the halls of Congress in 2010 when he came here as a college junior with thousands of other students to lobby for the American Dream Act.
After that, I really wanted to go, but it's just not possible.
Not possible because of his citizenship status as a DACA recipient. Patino cannot work on Capitol Hill because of a little-known law that prohibits hiring undocumented citizens for paid federal jobs. That came as a surprise to Arizona Representative Greg Stanton, who learned he could not hire his campaign director to work in his Washington office. He said that was a tough conversation to have.
Heartbreaking is probably the best way to describe it. I mean, someone that's poured out her time and talent, her heart and soul into your campaign, she would have been a huge asset to the people of Congressional District 9 because of her unique talent and passion and experience.
Attributes he says would benefit Congress if members could hire dreamers.
I think it's a real loss that members of Congress can't have the benefit of having DACA recipients or people who would benefit from the DREAM Act to work on Capitol Hill.
Arizona Representative Ann Kirkpatrick agrees and has been trying, unsuccessfully, to change the law for years now.
These students are wonderful people. They're bright, they're intelligent, they want to make a contribution to the American dream, and they deserve that right.
Stanton has no doubt immigrants can get the job done.
So many of our young people, whether they are documented or undocumented, they're entrepreneurial, many are bilingual, they have family and friends relationships in Mexico, Central Latin America. That's the future. That's the human capital that really benefits us.
Patino still has hopes of working on Capitol Hill, although his aspirations have changed since that first trip in 2010.
For me, it was always Senator John McCain when he was alive, right? He's always been, at least growing up, just having the voice on immigration.
Today, he hopes to contribute by working in the offices of Arizona Senators Kyrsten Sinema or Mark Kelly, which is why he's pulling for Kirkpatrick's bill.
It allows at least DACA recipients to be a little bit more part of the American society.
Kirkpatrick's bill, which would also cover people here on temporary protected status, simply says they'll be treated the same way as a U.S. citizen when it comes to a job in Congress. She has introduced it every year, but is hopeful for this year's version, which has 55 co-sponsors. In Washington, Molly Hudson, Cronkite News.
And speaking of weather, it's raining in Washington. Raining cherry blossom petals, that is. The blossoming cherry trees are a sure sign of spring in the nation's capital that can't be stopped by a mere pandemic, as Molly Hudson reports from our Washington bureau.
Every year for a decade, C.J. Greenhill Caldera has come to the tidal basin to paint Washington's famous cherry blossoms, a streak that was broken last year by the COVID pandemic.
My family
family moved down here from New York in 2007, and every year since I had been painting the beautiful blooms and the view like we're seeing today. Unfortunately, due to our global pandemic, I am not painting. I haven't painted on site since 2019.
Any other year, the festival would include a parade down Constitution Avenue, events on the streets, and even a kite festival on the National Mall.
1.5 million people coming to the city to enjoy the festival, 4 weeks of festivities, as well as, of course, the blossoms themselves at the tidal basin. That is a normal year.
Those crowds aren't coming to Washington this year, says Diana Mayhew, the president of the National Cherry Blossom Festival. Instead, the festival is going to them, virtually. Now you can see the 3,700 cherry trees from the comfort of your couch, fly a kite in your backyard, and follow Friday's celebration show through the streets of D.C.
It shows what the city looks like, what it was, what the celebration, all of the beautiful art sculptures, performances.
But a virtual celebration doesn't mean that parts of Washington aren't decked out for the annual celebration, Mayhew says.
So the city continues to be in bloom with pink, iconic buildings lit up in lights, pink lights, as well as blossom decor all over the city. Porches, we have hundreds of people registered to decorating their porches.
Still, there's something to be said for seeing the blossoms in person, says Greenhill Caldera, who made a special effort to come by on a weekday afternoon.
And it's still very magical after peak bloom, how the petals rain down as kind of this pink snow. So we're looking on the bright side and enjoying this new twist on cherry blossom season.
While you can still stroll by the trees in person, the virtual festival continues through Sunday, and Mayhew hopes that by next year, people will be able to enjoy the blossoms virtually and in person. In Washington, Molly Hudson, Cronkite News.
That's it for Cronkite News tonight. Thanks for joining us. Stay tuned for Break It Down. That's next. For top Arizona stories anytime, go to cronkitenews.azpbs.org.